It's good, everybody. Apologies for the technical difficulties.
Our truth burns bright. We stand as one, exposing your lies tonight. Tonight, no scam or false prophet can dim our light. You're not unfiltered. Black pride takes flight.
Shut up, you dumb. You sound like a clue. Get out. Stay clear of this room. We proud, we black, friendship forever stay paid. They lives and killing spraying from the soil they mislaid. That tale's a sham cooked up by scammers who toil. So shut up, chief X, you're a grifter, spoil your bow-hammer, drivel and your soul. Coptic words, that language is liturgical, not to rehearse curse. While Ethiopian and Nubian cops and Cairo so merciful, drop troops surgical, leaving your myths pitiful.
You act like black folks ain't speaking remake, give me your idiocy. Runs deep, can't study, can't even see it. Bubble brother, hush up before I knock your sugar out. Don't twist our ancestors' lore, I'll butcher your clout.
Unity can make our truth burns bright. We stand as one, exposing your lies tonight. No scam or false prophet can dim our light. You're not unfiltered.
Yeah.
Black pride takes flight.
Black pride.
You claim you came from Baltimore, just more trash on display. I bet the faithful flock was out dusting your ass away. Into that bad orange cat, you're dumber than a box of rocks. Pushing assimilation is politics that shop like cheap mock.
We spot you for a mile, your actions isn't slick. This is
Real knowledge.
not your chronological scholarship.
Who's in the building?
You scared, you should be watching as I spit. God's flame, no bars, no game. You're done when I put you to shame.
When your twisted lies crumble and your fake talk fades, our united voice echoes, truth never degrades. From the ashes of the
Who's all in the building?
our spirit invades.
Put a flame in the comments if you hear this. Hey, what's good, Trigger?
Goes the AKA Amir, the scams are total disgrace. Getting away with one jargon at a crooked scheme in place. Your twist words confused, try to call it the space. A fraud, your fake gospel body you with no base. You try to fool slow raps with your bogus empty guys, but your clumsy act crumbles under truth piercing eyes. Kevin stands united, no room for your deceitful art. Step aside, false prophet, your lies will break a heart.
Unity can make our truth burns bright. We stand as one, exposing your lies tonight. No scam or false prophet can dim our light. You're not unfiltered. Black pride takes flight.
It's good. K-Dub the Don. We finna go in. About to get it on and popping.
Unity in Kemet, our truth burns bright. We stand as one, exposing your lies tonight. No scam or false prophet can condemn our light. Kemet, unfiltered, black pride takes flight.
We outside. We outside. We outside in the building. We finna get it on and popping. This is gonna be the one that we're gonna review. Let's get it. If y'all don't know, this video of Phoenician 7, aka Egyptologist 7, aka Ernesto Graff, the cosplayer, is him explaining who he is. So he posted a article, you know, that he got for his Egyptology certificate or whatever. And he posted an article about burial traditions and the evolution of burial traditions. And this is how we know who he is, right? He posted this as a way of giving himself legitimacy. But he essentially exposed who he actually is to the world. For the longest time, he was up here cosplaying as a, you know, as a North African woman. But now we know his true identity with respect to this video. So I'm gonna just play this mashup and enjoy. We finna stop it, every once and then just to, break things down and just to see how everything's going. But let me know in the comments if y'all got, something that you want to add, before we continue the roast.
Opening the house, breaking down the system. Revolutionary science, no more ignorance, listen up. Taking down false narratives with facts on the mic. Stand up, speak truth, this is our fight. They got a study trying to claim this false, yo. One gene on one display, but that don't represent the whole show. No one on blast, but a single case ain't enough. We need the voices of the many, not just one bluff. Low coverage data, noise in every frame, dropping stats like loose change, but it's all playing games. Over-interpreted numbers, misread like a script. We calling out the bias, trying to let the truth flip. We're breaking down the science with a revolutionary spark. Complicators, radical thoughts, lighting up the dark. No more misinterpretation, no more twisted history. We fight for truth and justice, ancient roots are mystery. BCA, still trying to paint a fake scene. Clusters and protections, meaning more than what they seem. Circular model spin, trapped in their own web. But some so shaky, we calling them out, no celeb. S-Q, I tell the stories out of time. Linking gene flows to rulers, but the gaps are in the crime. Historical conflation, mixing myths with the science. We need robust truth, not a biased alliance. We're breaking down the science with a revolutionary spark. Complicators, radical vibes, lighting up the dark. No more misinterpretation, no more twisted history. We fight for truth and justice, ancient roots are mystery. In African diversity, they left the vital part out, assuming sub-Saharan noise is just a glitch in the route. But our past is rich and deep, a tapestry untold. Every voice, every gene, more precious than gold. It's ambiguous, timelines blurred 2,000 years wide. We demand precision, accountability with pride. Science ain't a tool for bias or for the status quo. It's the power of the people that can build history flow. Yo, this is more than data, it's the story of our kin. From the Nile to the Bay, let the truth begin. We reject misinterpretation, we uplift every voice and every strand of our DNA. Let's make the right choice. So listen up, academia, we're calling for reform. Higher coverage, broader scopes, break the norm. No more singular narratives, no more circular tales. We want science that empowers where truth prevails. We're the future and the past, together we stand. From open to the ancient lands, united hand in hand. Radical revolutionary, demanding justice in the lab. Unmasking every false and breaking down the old slab.
Appreciate y'all for tuning in on this late Sunday. It's about to be lit.
We're breaking down the science with a revolutionary spark. Complicators, radical vibes, lighting up the dark. No more misinterpretation, no more twisted history. We fight for truth and justice, ancient roots are mystery.
All of this is part of this article.
Trying to paint a fake scene. Clusters and protections, meaning more than what they seem. Circular model spin, trapped in their own web. Assumptions so shaky, we calling them out, no celeb. S-Q, I tell stories out of time. Linking gene flows to rulers, but the gaps are in the crime. Historical conflation, mixing myths with the science. We need robust truth, not a biased alliance. We're breaking down the science with a revolutionary spark. Complicators, radical vibes, lighting up the dark. No more misinterpretation, no more twisted history. We fight for truth and justice, ancient roots are mystery. Neglecting African diversity, they left the vital part out. Assuming sub-Saharan noise is just a glitch in the route. But our past is rich and deep, a tapestry untold. Every voice, every gene, more precious than gold. Dates ambiguous, timelines blurred 2,000 years wide. We demand precision, accountability with pride. Science ain't a tool for bias or for the status quo. It's the power of the people letting real history flow. History flow.
Yeah, if you notice, this is not the type of writing that you would expect from an Egyptology student.
It's the story of our kids from the Nile to the Bay. Let the truth begin. We reject misinterpretation. We uplift every voice and every strand of our DNA. Let's make the right choice. So listen up, academia, we're calling for reform.
And this is the part that's really, really important part of the video, right? Where it basically gets into, just the difference between genealogical ancestry, individually identifiable ancestors, genetic ancestry. This is an abstract hypothetical rendering of the inheritance of one's genes, and then genetic data, genetic similarities from admixture studies. Most of the times, these sambors, these grifters, these cosplayers like Ernesto, who want to promote an agenda against the idea of a Black Egypt or a Black Kemet, they use genetic data from half-baked PCAs and really biased sampling, in their so-called studies. and they use genetic similarities, and then they pose as if it's genetic ancestry and genealogical ancestry. But that's absolutely not the case. So you have to be able to distinguish between genealogical ancestry, genetic ancestry, and genetic data when you're dealing with these studies. Now, this study that these grifters are touting, this is Morez et al., right? And they're analyzing genetic data, right? They're analyzing genetic data that they found from the Old Kingdom. And they're analyzing it with respect to so-called Near Eastern Levantine populations, trying to draw a similarity and prove the, invading pharaonic race theory in antiquity. But what also must be noted is that one individual does not represent the entire Old Kingdom class and social status, and they must be considered when assessing ancient DNA. Now, this imbecile, Mr. Graf here, the grifter, Graf the grifter, doesn't know this. He doesn't know that you can't use one sample and act as if that's the whole entire Old Kingdom. And again, he is absolutely, completely out of it. He's just stupid. I'm just trying to find a creative way to say that he's an idiot. He's an idiot because he doesn't distinguish between genealogical ancestry and genetic ancestry, right? Now, you may say something about whether or not he has special needs, because he certainly looks like his bust was a little bit shorter riding to school. He certainly looks like that. And he's probably from the country of Spain. And, Spain, after the, 16th, 17th century, they kind of fell off a cliff. When they traded off places between themselves in England, a lot of them have a complex, the Moors mixed up with them. So a lot of them, they try to be white, even though they're not 100% white. So I know that Ernesto has this type of complex coming from a Spanish background, and also coming from a background of the people that don't believe that Jesus was a Messiah. Right. If you are familiar with the work of Dr. Tony Martin, he speaks about how there was a preponderance of those who don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah religiously owning slaves, especially in Guyana. So when you look at Mr. Graf, it's clear that he comes from that lineage, right? So the reason that he's on the internet spreading all this false propaganda against Black folk is because of a complex, and is because he's trying to push a narrative. But that narrative, as we can see and as we continue, is absolutely not true. Absolutely 100% not true. So let's continue.
Ernesto dice que tiene un avión, pero viaja en metro que apretó al montón. Se jacta de joyas y un gran...
No ancestral regression graph, as you can see here on the bottom. There's no ancestral regression graph. So there's no hypothetical rendering of ancestry within this study. So trying to make a claim about the peopling of Kemet without a hypothetical rendering, and just simply using what you see here on the right, PCA and genetic similarities, is not the way you would prove something. It's not the way that you would prove what they're trying to prove with respect to genetics, right? And again, the fact that they're doing it with a low coverage sample from one person just speaks volumes.
Pero no puede pagar un café en el rincón. Cuenta historias de viajes a Milán, pero está en casa viendo un viejo div.
And again, this is looking at some of the flaws of PCA, QADM, F3. These are not things that can be taken apodictively or without reasonable doubt with respect to genetic analysis. Not in the slightest. So pay attention to the flaws of PCA, QADM, F3. Look into this, freeze it if you need to. This is key when you're looking at these stories trying to promote the invading pharaonic race theory in the genetic sense. Pay attention to these different features and these different elements of the studies, because they'll help you be able to locate lies from grifter like Ernesto, who cherry pick information to try to prove their, neo Flinders Petrie narrative that it's absolutely not true.
Habla de lujos tan alto y galán, pero su carro no arranca jamás. Ernesto es un embustero, pura intención, un rey sin trono, sin dirección. Nos hace reír con tanta contradicción, viviendo en cuentos sin solución.
This is really important because these North African Sambors, they'll try to act like EZ830, being in the Old Kingdom means that, I don't know, it's some type of white Berber. But if you study the Ethiopian model, especially the research of Dr. Trombetta et al., which, you know, these idiot grifters like Ernesto certainly haven't studied that, you can see that the descendant of AZ830 is literally found throughout Central and Southern Africa. And these morons, they don't read. They're completely, you know, academically, scholastically illiterate. They don't know anything about this. I'm going to get after Metatron after this. But again, like, they're celebrating that fact, not knowing the argument of conventional Africana studies, not even knowing the positions, mischaracterizing the positions, because again, they're special needs. If you take a look at Mr. Ernesto, you look at some of the photos that he has, his bus was definitely shorter. His bus was definitely shorter riding to school. He's definitely, you know, he's got the handicap. You know, he rides with that little, you know, that handicap thing, and he's parking in the handicap spot. He's definitely not all there. And from his arguments, you could clearly see that.
En la esquina cuentan mil secretos de un castillo y mil cohetes discretos, pero nadie se deja engañar. Sabemos bien que no puede pagar. Dice que tiene amigos en la realeza, pero lo buscan por una de esas. Sección de cuentos es donde se posa. Vende mentiras como otra cosa. Ernesto es un embustero, pura invención, un rey sin trono, sin dirección. Nos hace reír con tanta contradicción, viviendo en cuentos sin solución.
Yeah, and again, from haplogroup I, you know, haplogroup I being present in so-called Cushitic populations in Kenya, you know, EZ830, all of the above. Like, when you look at these things, anybody who's studied this stuff, you know that genetics is one of the weakest fields of anthropology. So to try to use genetics to make the argument, but not even recognize the flaws of low coverage data. Again, this is somebody whose bus was shorter riding to school. This is somebody who had to, you know, they park in the handicap spot. Buildings are supposed to be designed for accessibility for these individuals, because again, it's just, they lack basic understanding. Now, Ernesto's a troll. Ernesto's a cosplayer, so I wouldn't even put him in that category. I'm low-key trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, but again, like, he's someone who thinks the sun is an enemy. You know, he's someone who, like, SPF 1,000,000,000 is not even strong enough sunscreen, right? He obviously has a complex. That's why he's been posting a lot of this anti-Black content online. It's really, really sad, honestly. But a lot of this stuff is easy to debunk. So none of y'all should ever feel afraid or doubtful with respect to these grifters, especially when they post genetic information that is terribly, horrifically flawed. So from here, let's just take a look at this video. I'm going to review my video. I'm going to get into my video, Metatron. As I said, Ernesto's a grifter. He's a fraud. He's a liar. He's cosplaying as a Berber woman. He's actually a really pale person who doesn't believe that Jesus was a Messiah, who wears small hats. He's a really, really just a fraudulent dude all around. And you know, it's in his best interest to not respond to this video, because if he does, you know, y'all finna get more Spanish diss tracks and more. And for those who don't know, embustero is the Spanish word for deceiver. It's the Spanish word for manipulator. So if you ever see somebody who's lying and manipulating, just call them an embustero, right? And that's synonymous with Ernesto Graf. So now, let's share this tab. Am I sharing this? Oh, shoot. Let's get into this.
Team Histories. Upon reviewing Metatron's video purporting to counter Home Team History's erudite commentary on the Africanity of ancient Carthage, I find myself compelled to articulate a response that not only corrects his many historical and anthropological misapprehensions, but also lays bare the depth of his intellectual impoverishment. The discourse begins with Home Team History's cogent exposition of Africa's vast ethnic and phenotypic diversity, particularly within North Africa. This diversity, far from diminishing Black identity, epitomizes the inherent heterogeneity of Black populations. Indeed, Black peoples have long demonstrated that a spectrum of features from darker complexions to lighter, more aquiline attributes can emerge naturally, without necessitating foreign admixture. Metatron's clumsy celebration of this fact, as if awarding himself a prize at a parochial contest, reveals an outdated and rudimentary
Y'all gotta let me know what you think of this Metatron. I'm finna respond to his next video, the video that he posted in response. He posted the video in response to my video, but specifically going after Rebecca Fudo Kennedy. And we finna review just some of the lies that he said. And I'm finna post a video with a lot of these talking points, well organized with data and everything. But just let me know what y'all think in the comments, and then we can continue.
understanding of phenotypic evolution. One must note that, within our cultural lexicon, the term Black employed here in the Diopian sense embraces the full range of complexions exhibited by Paleo-African populations and their descendants. This linguistic and cultural continuum has, for millennia, affirmed that the presence of lighter features does not detract from one's blackness. Turning to the historical record, the Amazigh, Imahag, Moors, and so-called Berbers have, and continue to be, unequivocally Black. The term Berber comes from the Beriberi people, also known as the Zagawa, and was historically used to describe a range of inner African populations from so-called Nubians to Somalis. Moreover, the Phoenicians, known also as Canaanites, and identified in biblical and Hebraic traditions as descendants of Ham, are inextricably linked to African ancestry. If one subscribes to the tenets of the Afro-Asiatic language family, which individuals like Metatron certainly do, it becomes
and that's a major point. You know, you're going to hear Metatron idiotically. He tries to claim that he's not a racist. But again, I think if he spent enough time shaving and bathing, you know, if he spent more time doing that than pontificating online as if he's some type of expert, going after PhDs like Rebecca Fudo Kennedy with expertise in antiquity, right? You know, if he spent more time doing that, right, than actually posing as a grifter and an intellect online, he would probably get more ahead in life. But when he promotes Semitic and Mediterranean, like the Semitic race and the Mediterranean race, classical 19th and 20th century racism, the Semitic race was positioned to Caucasian. The Mediterranean race at the same time was positioned to Caucasian. Now, a lot of times modern sandbores use these terms, but they're trying to act as if they have some type of false neutrality, right? Or they're trying to promote a neutrality that's false. And I'm going to explain it in my video. What they do is they position Mediterranean and Semitic, the Mediterranean race and the Semitic race, as if it's not white and not Black. But in reality, historically, the usage of that term was to deny infra-Saharan, you know, so-called sub-Saharan African civilization to its rightful place in human history. They weaponize Mediterranean and they weaponize Semitic. So when they find something that has like a Somali brachiocephalic or straight head type, or something of a remain in the ancient African context that's not fitting into the so-called Seligman true Negro morphology, then they would just say, oh, that's a Black Caucasian, or oh, that's a dark-skinned, you know, European. And this is how they formulated these different constructs in Mediterranean and Semitic race. So when Metatron promotes Semitic race, he's promoting a construct that is proximal to whiteness. And he's reinvigorating a lot of the racist, you know, colonial constructs that many Africana scholars have been fighting for, you know, ad nauseum. And again, like I said, if you spent more time grooming than posing and grifting as some type of intellect, what he's doing is basically promoting, you know, these racial hierarchies, you know, whether he's doing it consciously or unknowingly, whether he's too stupid to realize it, or whether he's consciously doing it, you know, through the promotion of Semitic and Mediterranean race, he is promoting a colonialist hierarchy. So let's continue.
Evident that the immediate ancestors of all Semitic languages originated in Africa. Scholars such as Stephen Weitzman have argued that Semitic originated on the African continent. Metatron's invocation of Herodotus to constrict the geographical scope of the Erythraean Sea to the Persian Gulf is demonstrably flawed. Herodotus, in the opening lines of his history, alongside corroborative evidence from the periplus of the Erythraean Sea and ancient cartography, clearly designates this term as encompassing the broader northwestern Indian Ocean, including the Arabian Sea. Such evidence supports the plausibility that the Phoenicians emerged from Africa before extending their reach into Asia. The lineage of the Phoenicians, tracing back to the Natufians, the Levantine descendants of ancestral North Africans, is further corroborated by the work of scholars such as Lazaridis, who posits that the ancient Iranian culture of North Africa contributed substantially to Natufian ancestry. Craniometric analyses reveal that both the ancient Garamanti and Carthaginian populations possessed pronounced infra-Saharan traits. As Shamarka Keita has compellingly argued, despite Carthage's foundation by Phoenician elites, its prolonged presence in Africa resulted in complete Africanization. It is important to continually note that blackness has never been contained to the Hegelian Saharan, sub-Saharan false dichotomy. In reality, there was a continuum of black culture and civilization from infra-Saharan Africa to supra-Saharan Africa. According to the conventional Western model, or contemporary Western Central.
And again, these idiots who they try so desperately to separate, Western Central Inner Africans from North Africa. According to the conventional Western model of Western historiographers, Western linguists, they literally say that Inner Africa, like the people that they call the true Negro, the so-called Sub-Saharan African, quote unquote, which is a false, dichotomy. But these people originated in North Africa, both archaeologically, with respect to the Kiphian and Tenerian culture of the Central Sahara, to linguistically the Niger-Saharan or Congo-Saharan macrophyla. So if we were to use conventional, non-African centered, in many cases, white scholarship, they say that Inner Africans, black people, black African, quote unquote, came from North Africa, originated from North Africa. Now, with respect to that, we know that there's a lot of caveats with respect to the so-called Nilotic origin or Happy River Basin origin of Saharan populations. We definitely know that that is the case, and that is true. So many of the people who are in the Sahara northern part of Africa were actually in the Happy River Basin to the east before settling in North Africa and then migrating down. But what that shows is that there is an interregional aspect of African populations historically, and African populations didn't just sit in one space, as many of these isolationist West African nationalist chronologist grifters would like to suggest. So again, these folks, they're not really well read. They're promoting, racialist, hegemonic propaganda, and it's really, really clear when you analyze their talking points.
And Southern Africans originated in North Africa and directly descend from Saharan herders of the Kiphian and Tenerian cultures. Africanist and Greenbergian linguists have even posited that the majority of the languages of Africa originated in the Congo-Saharan or Niger-Saharan macrophyllum, which was spoken in the so-called Oranian or Ibero-Maurusian culture in the terminal Pleistocene. Many of these groups migrated south after the desiccation of the Sahara after the end of the last humid period. Some of them remained. It is very easy to prove that the Sahara is not and has never been a racial dividing line on the continent. To attempt to erase the blackness of Carthage is not only historically irresponsible, but ethically untenable, particularly when one...
I mean, when you see Carthaginian statues that look like this, and you see images like this of Septimus Severus, he's literally called Fuscus or Dark in a lot of Roman literature. Cassius Dio calls him of the Libyan race, and we know that during that time, Libya denoted Inner Africa, specifically Upper Libya. It becomes impossible to deny that these people were part and parcel of the dynamic of the North African existence. And it's funny that the same people who want to say that, they would obviously call somebody like Barack Obama black, even though he has a white mom. So they would recognize within the modern Western diasporic construct, even players in Italy, players from, Metatron's own country who have a white parent and a black parent are called black. But when you see this obvious mixture and intermixing of the Carthaginian population, and you see clear evidence of people that would fit into Seligman's false morphology of true Negro, all of a sudden you don't want to say that Hannibal's black because you don't want to give that to black folk. You want to maintain your hegemony, racialist hegemony and antiquity, and it's obvious. But it's clear from these statuettes that yes, people who fit that morphology definitely existed within Carthage at that time, and they were definitely part of the elites of the society at that time, right? But even if you want to go into the so-called Semitic route and you see those with brachiocephalic and more aquiline features, there are people on the African continent, say the Somalis and the Ethio-Semitic people, the Amhara speakers, the Tigrinya speakers, that often fit that morphology as well. So to deny the multi-ethnicity and the phenotypic diversity inherent in Black Paleo-African populations is just to be an imbecile. It's just to be an ignoramus. It's to be an idiot. It's to ride a bus that was shorter to school, right? These individuals are just absolutely moronic. And I don't mean to, there are some people who are so-called special needs who are brilliant African-centered scholars. There are neurodivergent people out there in the audience. I'm not talking about those brothers and sisters who have helped my channel in the past, but there is clearly a difference when you're dealing with somebody from that community, either from the neurodivergent community, the disabled community, who's just an idiot, who's just dumb, who's just dumber than a box of rocks. And then their racism just makes them even more stupider. Like, it's just even more moronic, the arguments that they come up with, the untenable positions that they come up with. It's just pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. And just the fact that they have so many, other idiots listening to them just shows you how deep of a hole, how much depravity exists with the respect to history, antiquity, and the analysis of the human past.
Considers that Titanic figures like Hannibal Barca and Septimus Severus were unequivocally black. Genetic studies further reinforce this. Uniparental markers reveal that ancient North Africans were indeed black. For example, the YDNAEM8 one is observed at frequencies as high as 90% among the Tahol Libyan Imihag, while back migration MTD and AH1 frequencies reach approximately 61% among the Libyan Fezzan Imihag. The Imihag of Egypt's Siwa Oasis exhibits MTD and A haplotypes M1, LOA1, L3I, and L4B2 that are distinctly African, and their autosomal connections with the Beja people of the Hopi River Valley trace back to a common North African ancestor some 5,000 years ago. These lineages emerged at a time when dark pigmentation was the norm across Europe, a fact underscored.
Again, and this is for these grifters, these trolls. During the time that a lot of these populations that we're talking about, especially within the North African context, existed, Europe was predominantly dark-skinned. Mesolithic Europe is characterized by dark skin, from the Labrana man in Mesolithic Spain 7,000 years ago to Cheddar man 10,000 years ago. So white skin is very recent, and particularly the Yamnaya civilization and its descendants and the Belbeker culture and the corded ware culture, these so-called Proto-Indo-European populations, they are the one that brought forth a lot of these light-skinned genes, right? And the development of these light-skinned genes. But prior to them, whether you're dealing with the origin of farming or even further back with the hunter-gatherers, the foragers of Europe, these are dark-skinned populations, as you can clearly see here. So when you're dealing with so-called back migration populations in Africa in the Paleolithic, the vast majority of these are tropically adapted, dark-skinned Africans who left the continent and came back.
By a 7,000-year-old Mesolithic specimen from Labrana, Spain, whose genetic makeup attests to African pigmentation and traits indicative of lactose intolerance. What this shows is that for the bulk of African history, the migrants accepted into the continent were tropically adapted Africans who left the continent and came back. This is why some scholars view the term ancestral North African as more acceptable than basal Eurasian. In summation, Metatron's video is a lamentable exemplar of intellectual deficiency, marred by a dismissive attitude toward a rich and multifaceted historical reality. The comprehensive evidence from phenotypic diversity and cultural linguistics to archaeology, craniometry, and genetics irrefutably confirms that ancient North Africa and its illustrious civilizations were indelibly black. It is incumbent upon scholars and enthusiasts alike to reject reductive narratives and to embrace the profound black legacy of African heritage, a legacy that stands as a cornerstone of human civilization.
Rebecca Futo Kennedy, while surfing a bunch of...
I don't want to get into this video yet. That's on Rebecca or the study of antiquity and Middle Ages. I'm going to get into Metatron because Metatron responded to my video. And don't get it twisted. That dude responded to my video. He took a break from, not grooming at all and decided to respond to the video, right? And he specifically responded to who I referenced, Rebecca Futo Kennedy. But I'm going to review the video and respond. I actually have an organized response ready that I'm going to release, within the next coming days. But I just want to give you a raw response to the video just as it comes. So.
Constantly being swarmed by
these stupid commercials.
Respond to a video and possibly a series of videos in the near future from a channel called Study of Antiquities and the Middle Ages. It is my personal belief that some of the contributors and experts interviewed on this channel do a terrible job and push politically modified incorrect history to benefit their agenda at the expenses of the truth. And as of the writing of this video, I believe some of the guests use their academic titles to give an aura of authority to...
Yeah, so basically he's talking about how he disagrees with certain scholars because they're liberal or because they don't agree with his anti-DEI polemic, essentially. So I don't want to get really into that. He's just going to BS.
Right, because she's going to be fair. I accepted that there are some people. Not an answer to him, and my sincerest condolences. It's an answer to her. Okay, me versus her.
And rest in peace to Nick Barstow. He was a great interviewer of this channel. I use some of his content as well, but rest in peace to him. We're just going to get into the video. Again, fair use.
The study of antiquity and the Middle Ages. As always, I am your host, Nick Barksdale, and today we are joined once again by Dr. Rebecca Futo Kennedy. This is my question. Was Hannibal, the man who made Rome tremble, black?
As with any other question about this, right? First, let's call the thing what it is. This obsession with trying to make sure that this great general Hannibal, the man who makes Rome tremble.
By the way, if you watch the full context of the video and not just these clips, the interviewer Nick actually gives a caveat and says that, hey, when I'm studying North Africa and whether or not the Carthaginians were black, there's always this tendency to separate the Saharan zone from the infra-Saharan zone, right? And he tells that to Dr. Kennedy. Like he gives that context, and she's basically responding to his question in context, like in the context that he asked it.
Is a white man is, of course, the desire is strong. And, we can go back to Dodge and sort of like the Caesar, Alexander, Hannibal, right? Because
desire by who? I would like to ask, Professor, because
literally post Champollion, like post the invasion of ancient Kimi during the late period by Champollion, they tried to make all of the Hamites and Semites white. This is literally the general trajectory of Western historiography and Western academia. They tried to make all of these civilizations connected to whiteness because this is during the same time that they're perpetuating their colonial project. So when he tries to act stupid and say who, this is literally part of Western history. So, it begins to get a little bit insane, to even question this.
Personally, I do not care. If anything, I'm a pro Scipio Africanus man. So, but then again,
as if being pro Scipio Africanus. And again, like it's funny how you take the Roman side other than the African side. I mean, I guess that's to be expected as the Italian so-called that he claims to be. But let's continue.
I'm sure there are some people that would want to claim every person of importance, a fringe, mind you, but they want to claim every person of importance to
fringe. Again, this is literally mainstream Western historiography. The so-called whitewashing of historical figures, like Jesus Christ. For anybody who grew up in a Christian church, Jesus Christ was always depicted as white, even though he's described as skins of burnt bronze, hair like lamb's wool. So that's an example of whitewashing there. Even Ham in the Bible, Ham, who is supposed to be the ancestors of all Africans, is depicted as white. So these are characters in a Semitic context that are whitewashed. And we went over how the Semitic race construct is connected to 19th and 20th century racism, specifically against Black people, but generally to maintain a racialist hierarchy. So for him to like play dumb with this, when he obviously knows that he's playing dumb to his audience. There's no way he doesn't know about the whitewashing of historical characters. And there's no way that you could equate that to a blackwashing, because there is no institutional or academic effort to blackwash. I know idiots like, Metatron will try to say that, oh, this is the DEI, and he'll compare literal like entertainment. He'll compare literal entertainment to actual academic research. But I guarantee you that there is no institutional academic effort to blackwash the characters of the past. That is a conspiracy. On the other hand, we literally have documented evidence ad nauseum, historically, through multiple centuries of institutions of the academy trying to whitewash.
To be white, but obviously if she started like this, she's also going to mention those people that are trying to claim him and many other important people as Black, even though they weren't, right? Because she's going to be fair.
Even though they weren't. Like, and again, throughout this video, he posts zero evidence. There's no evidence. He claims to be debunking a PhD, somebody with expertise in the antiquities, with zero sources. With literally zero sources.
I accepted that there are some people that do try to do that with white people. There is also the other side of the equation. If you're going to be fair, you're going to mention both, right, Professor?
Because it classifies Hannibal as one of the sort of great generals, we have to claim him. But also, I think going back to this tension that I already talked about with the issue of sub-Saharan, and what we mean by that sort of classification is this desire also to, for people who lay claim to descents from in North Africa that are anti-Black as part of the sort of history of the development of Arab invasion and modern imperialism, there's a strong tendency to want to make sure we separate that. So yes, okay, Egyptians might have Black skin, might be Black Africans, and even if their skin tones are slightly different, we don't call them Black today.
So now you're utilizing the modern term for Black, and you're retro-applying it to the ancient world in order to justify a very arbitrary classification, as I have expressed.
And so
again, this idiot doesn't know about the epigraphy, the textual evidence that we have of the Remenkimi classifying themselves as Black. So you claiming that Blackness is a modern term, maybe the way that certain racist white people define it today is modern, but with respect to the idiomatic expressions like Black is beautiful, Black pride, Black power that exist within contemporary African descendant populations on the continent and the diaspora, we can trace this back with diachronic linguistics to classical times. So no, Blackness existed among ancient Africans, and they called themselves Black. And many Europeans, like the Greeks and the Romans, borrowed that term, borrowed that demonym, that ethnonym from African populations. So for him to try to say that to discuss Blackness in antiquity is anachronistic is just insane, because it's somebody who's completely divorced and completely, ignorant of historical linguistics. It is a very, very incredibly ignorant thing to say. So much for you're allegedly annihilating a PhD. And here I am easily cutting through a lot of your BS arguments.
Hannibal Black, again, the question is really, can we make him white? Which is
no. That's mental manipulation, Professor.
That's not mental manipulation. That's answering the question in the context that the interviewer, Nick Barstow, asked. He said, why are you trying to separate North Africa from infra-Saharan or sub-Saharan Africa? And she said, yeah, it's because they're trying to make Hannibal white. So she's directly answering the question in the context of the interviewer. But again, Metatron is going to twist that because he wants to push his racialist narrative.
We're not going to let that one go. The question is Hannibal Barca Black. It's a neutral question. Now, depending on who is asking it, then we...
That's not a neutral question in light of the context of Western imperialism, colonialism, and the denial of the Black place in history, of the Black origins of human civilizations. That is absolutely not a neutral question, right? And this is the false neutrality that a lot of these imbeciles like Metatron try to promote, as if Western historiography is neutral. And there's plenty of philosophers and academicians or academics, scholars, scientists, philosophers of science, philosophers of history who have stated that history is not neutral. It's biased. According to the mere act of recording history is a political act, usually sanctioned by the state or by rigid institutions. So for you to claim that it is neutral is, again, idiotic. 100% idiotic. 100%.
It could be like, yeah, I could agree that specific individual may be asking it for the wrong reasons. One of which could be, can we make him white? If that's the inherent purpose of asking a historical question, then yes, the premise of the question is flawed, not the question. However, you should then be honest and fair and say the same for the people who ask the question.
The context of the question matters, and the context of the society that it's being asked in matters. We're not we're not in a vacuum. We are people that are located in space and time and located within cultures and histories. We are absolutely not in the vacuum. So for Metatron to divorce the question from the context just speaks volumes about his motives, honestly. Yeah, history is biased. Yeah, literally, whose history is told? When I was young, it was typically European within the Western education system. So that in and of itself shows you the bias.
Because they really want to make him black, but you don't, which means you are biased. Because at least I ask both and I reject both. That's true equality and academic neutrality.
False neutrality like CNN, where they bring on a Republican and a Democrat, and this side says this and that side says that. And they don't actually check to see which one's lying. They just present both points for entertainment value. This is what he's doing. He's positioning Mediterranean and Semitic as neither white nor black, when historically and conventionally that those terms were racialized as Caucasian and proximal to whiteness.
The fact that I need to explain that to a professor is beyond me.
What is Hannibal black? Again, the question is really, can we make him white? Which is the one thing he's not. He could be lots of things. The one thing he isn't is white, because that's not a category that they would have recognized.
Literally, he calls that intellectual dishonesty. I wonder if he's going to offer a single reference, right? He'll probably do some grooming before he offers a single legitimate reference. This whole video is just, conjecture, speculation, and pushing a narrative with no support, with no resources.
And it is actually one that fits. But if you look at his bust, right, we have this bust that I'll share with Nick, again, that comes from Capua. It was found in Italy, this bust of Hannibal. Because remember, of course, the Carthaginians controlled Spain.
Yeah, this looks like, this could be really anything. I could see this being a Ethiopian dude, a Somali dude. And actually, there's speculation to say that this isn't even Hannibal. Like, if I just briefly, if I look at the Wikipedia page, and, take Wikipedia with a grain of salt. But again, if I look at the Wikipedia page, it says the bust identity has been disputed. Naples Museum Catalog of 1888 put a question mark in its attribution to Hannibal. So as early as the 19th century, they were questioning whether or not this is legit, right? According to Eve MacDonald, the bust features a cloak of a Roman commander, Pallidamentum. So according to Australian historian Dexter Hoyos, there are strong suspicions that the bust is a Renaissance work rather than an ancient one. And there are numerous instances of fakes from the 16th to 19th century dealing with false artifacts. Even the so-called famous Nefertiti bust is speculated as fake. So this could be the hero of silver coins of Durnus of Phoenicia and Pharnabazus, right? And there are some people who have defended the bust identification as Hannibal, but you don't know for sure. And if this is the cloak of a Roman commander, then this is definitely, or we have reason to suspect that that is not Hannibal whatsoever. So to try to use this as an instance of Hannibal is a lie. And again, this could be anything. I could see this morphology fitting a Somali or an Ethiopian person, or maybe a person from Chad potentially, or it could be somebody from West Asia. Like, there's a variety. And we know that Rome was multi-ethnic. It wasn't just so-called white European, especially during its expansionist period. And it was founded by an African named Septimius Severus, who is described as dark and of the Libyan race, right? So potentially a Tuareg or a inner African Sahelian person. So again, and yeah, that's right, Tubu, Zagawa, Fulani, etc. Yeah, he could fit some of these morphologies. Just because he has aquiline features and less prognathism and a brachiocephalic skull, or a straighter as opposed to longer skull, doesn't mean that he's not African. And again, these people, they always go off of the Seligman true Negro morphology, that false taxometric, early 19th century methodology. But when you actually look at African populations, there is an extensive diversity of African populations from West and Central to Northern Africa. There are certain West African populations, though they may be dark skinned, they actually have a similar morphology as so-called North Africans and some East Africans. like as Trigger Happy is noting. And you see that throughout the African continent. You see so-called Sawa or Douala people, Igbo people who are incredibly light-skinned, as light as the Khoisan, naturally, without any mixture. And we have the ability to evolve these traits independent of external mixture. Dr. Shamarka Keita has talked about this when he deals with the microevolution of phenotypic traits. So to just look at this bust and say that this is impossible to be African and not recognize the diversity between infra-Saharan and super-Saharan African populations is, again, bunk. And it just speaks to an underlying narrative that Metatron is trying to push. So let's go ahead and continue.
Parts of Spain, they control parts of Italy, they control Sardinia and Sicily. If you go to Sicily, the history of Sicily is a sort of highly mixed African, Greek, indigenous, and Italian cultures.
Since you push for precision in language, I will use the same method onto you, because one thing that people do, for example, Simon Elliott, is that they will say Septimius Severus is the greatest African emperor, and he keeps saying African because he knows that people will translate that as black. And the reason why I know that is because at one point he actually did slip and said he was the greatest black.
He was literally from Africa. So you see how he has a problem with African? He doesn't want to say that Hannibal is an African, even though he was born in Africa. He doesn't want to say that Carthage was an African civilization, even though it was developed in the majority of the population. Even the craniometrics and the bioanthropological data says that it's inter-African. He doesn't want to say that Hannibal was African. He doesn't want to say that Septimius Severus was African, even though the Roman historian Cassius Dio literally described him as an African and said he was of the Libyan race. In the Greco-Roman time, the entire continent, even in certain maps, was described as Libya. So when Cassius Dio calls him a Libyan and says that he was dark in other sources, other Roman sources, they're calling him black. And as Trigger Happy says, a Somali woman went to Senegal saying that she found people who look more Somali than Somalis. Yeah, I definitely would like to see that. That would be really interesting. But seriously, like, you can clearly see the bias of Metatron. He doesn't want to call people African that were born in Africa, unless, and he's going to later on use the so-called stupid Elon Musk trope, where Elon Musk's Nazi ancestors moved from Canada to South Africa to help apartheid. The Carthaginians, by the time of Hannibal, they had already been developed from a North African context and even a African Semitic context from the Phoenicians on the African continent for millennia. Their genetics had already been there for millennia. So that's definitely an example of a false equivalency. And y'all are going to hear that later on in the video. Let's continue.
African emperor, he did say that. People of this political persuasion will do that. So do extremists on the other side, but this is important because we're focusing on this right now. They will.
And again, you see how he tries to position himself as a neutral. He tries to position himself as a neutral, just as he said, I don't want to call these people African because people will think that they're black. He literally just said that. He literally just said that as he's trying to position himself as neutral. I know y'all are seeing this.
Will use language in a way that allows them to be not specific, vague, so that they push the message they want without having to say the stuff that would actually get debunked. I'm still going to debunk you, though, because I know exactly what you're doing. Look at this.
He could be lots of things. The one thing he isn't is white, because that's not a category that they would have recognized. And it isn't.
Because that's not a category they would have recognized, then they wouldn't recognize the modern category of black either. It's
he's such an idiot. He doesn't know anything about historical linguistics. When she's saying, and I'm doing this off the top of the dome, when she's saying that they wouldn't recognize the white race, what she's saying is that whiteness at that time was more of a gender category as opposed to a so-called ethnic category. Though they did use, the so-called pale in certain instances, but that could be anything, right? But they did have the context of black. They absolutely positively, and I'm going to see if I can share just some brief evidence, going into some of this, because they absolutely positively definitely did. And Smash Rockwell, shout out to Smash Rockwell, certainly has a book called Black Like Osiris, where he goes into all of this evidence. But I'm gonna see if I can share with y'all this screen just to let y'all know what it is. I feel like these combos, black is greater than African, because some people also try to run with the term African as a non-racial term, even though all knows that black equals African. Facts. Legitimate facts. So I'm going to stop this screen and I'm going to see if I could share another screen just to show y'all some evidence of this. And let me know if y'all could see this. Y'all can see this screen right here. So I'm going to get into some of the Roman evidence. So look at this. Lucian's narrative, as depicted by Lycinus, offers insight into the Greek perspective on ancient Egyptian characteristics. So Lycin is described as a young Egyptian, and it emphasizes his black skin and his thick lips and his thin legs, right? So this is an example of, Greco-Roman stereotypes. You have Aristotle's work of physiognomy, where he associates skin color with courage, claiming that an excessively black or white complexion indicates cowardice. Now listen to this. Too black a hue marks a coward, as with Ethiopian and Ethiopians, and too white a complexion does this as well, as seen in women. The complexion of courage lies in between the two. So Rebecca Futo-Kennedy is accurate when she said they wouldn't have identified a white race, but they definitely identified whiteness as a feminine or gendered characteristic, while they did mark black to be racialized or to refer to Egyptians and Ethiopians. Then you have Diodorus Siculus, and he says ancient Egyptians were a colony of the Ethiopians under Asar, right? And he located Herodotus, who obviously describes the Colchians, and he says that they were from Kemet or Egypt for their black skin and woolly hair. So again, he's identifying blackness with a certain population of people. You have the Roman soldier and historian Ammianus Marcellinus, and he says the men of Egypt were mostly brown or black skinned with a desiccated appearance. And then they're emphasizing, like, Diogenes Laertius further reinforces this perception of blackness in his description of Zeno, the founder of the Stoic school, with Apollonius of Tyre emphasizing Zeno's gaunt, very tall, and black stature, right? So this shows that black people still inhabited Kimi during the Common Era. You have Apollodorus attributes the name Egypt to Aegyptos, who conquered the land of the black-footed ones. In his play, The Suppliants, Aeschylus describes Egyptiades, the son of Aegyptos, as having black limbs. Similarly, Achilles Tatius of Alexandria likens the herdsmen of the Egyptian Delta to Ethiopians, describing them as black. These sources confirm that in the perception of Greco-Roman authors, the Kemites were black people, right? So again, like, if you were to analyze the Greco-Roman source material, they obviously show that they literally define themselves as black. They literally. So again, going back to the Methatron video.
Either, Professor, linguistically speaking, because you're not a linguist, either you apply the ancient terminology and you stick to it, whether it's we're using black or white, or you apply the modern terminology and you stick to it. You can't say, oh yeah, the people would be black because that's how we would modernly recognize it, so you consider black as a term fit for description, even when it comes to how you retro-identify a people, aka the Egyptians. So in that case, you're okay with the fact that black is a category they wouldn't have recognized, but when it comes to white, no, it's not valid. That's the one thing he certainly isn't, because they wouldn't have recognized that term.
And again, this idiot isn't familiar with historical linguistics as he tries to castigate Dr. Rebecca Futo-Kennedy. I showed numerous examples of Greco-Roman authors literally calling the people of ancient Kemet or Egypt and Ethiopia black. They literally call them black while reserving white for a gendered category for women who are likely paler than them. That's most of the time where they use white. They didn't racialize white in the way that they use black to apply to Africans. It's clear. Shout out to Pan-African James in the building. Peace, peace, peace. Let's continue.
Because it's a modern term. This shows a tremendous dishonesty when it comes to how language is systematically used to convey a preconceived message. Problem is, these are recorded and I can dissect them. I can pause you anytime I want and I can dissect your language, and I will. Because if there is one thing I cannot stand is intellectual dishonesty and propaganda, masked as academia. These two things, I'll fight them until the end of my days. Doesn't matter where they come from or for what political persuasion. I would like to also underline that the Romans did refer and did use the term white. Of course, it's different to how we use it today, also because people use it in different ways. And that's in fact one of the things that I will focus. What do you mean by white, Professor? I'll get to that in a second. I want to let her talk first. So put a pin on that. The actual definition of white we are working with, clarity before explanation, clarity of language. We need to make sure we understand each other. She's not doing that. She's keeping it purposely vague. But once again, the Romans did use it. They classified the world with black, white, and blonde. Blonde being the Germanic, white being themselves, so Mediterraneans, Italians, Greeks, and then black being the Ethiopians.
actually one that fits. But if you look at his bust, right, we have this bust that I'll share with Nick again that comes from Capua. It was found in Italy. This bust of
probably not him.
Of Hannibal, because remember, of course, the Carthaginians controlled Spain.
Yeah, shout out to I got to give him credit for admitting that most scholars say that that's not him, because a lot of these racist sandboards use this as a way to try to refute that he came from Inner Africa, when most of the scholarships is that that's not him. But there's no reason for anybody to deny the plausibility, at the very least, that Hannibal Barca was black, right? Even though we know that he most likely was, with respect to the mixture and the bioanthropological data of Carthage at the time, and the fact that he called themselves, they literally refer to themselves as Canaanites, which I'm going to review in the video that I released in response to this. And if you look at the Semitic literature, Canaan, you know, the so-called Semitic race, which Semitic speakers that Metatron is trying to racialize, Canaan is literally black or Hamite within the Hebraic context, within that Semitic context, whether you're dealing with Hebrew or Arabic in the Quran, like Ham or Ham is literally the descendant or the ancestor of Africans. So let's continue.
Spain, they control parts of Italy, they control Sardinia and Sicily. If you go to Sicily, the history of Sicily is a sort of highly mixed African, Greek, indigenous, and Italian cultures. Even today, I think they're still not sure how Italian they are down there.
You're wrong, we're Italian. I'm Sicilian, we are Italian. This is one thing that really pisses me off. Yes, let me say it, okay? Because this is, since he is so clearly on the politically correct side and we need to defend indigenous people, I'm an indigenous Sicilian, okay? I find that statement offensive, Professor, as a Sicilian. So, yes, Sicilians are proud of being Sicilian, which means if you ask a Sicilian, are you a Sicilian first or are you an Italian first? A lot of Sicilians will say Sicilian first, but we are both. A Sicilian is an Italian. So the difference between Sicilian and Italian is that all Sicilians are Italian, but not.
The reason why people have this thing, I mean, there's a whole Godfather episode about this. Moors came in from North Africa, black people came from North Africa, mixed in with women. Like if you go to northern Italy, you'll see more blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, whereas southern Italy, I was about to say southern idiot. Southern Italy, idiot's actually more fitting for Metatron. You know, southern Italy, Sicily has more Africoid or southern hemispheric features. This is why it's a joke within Italian culture to say that all these Sicilians are black, they're the descendants of Moors, are not really Italian because they're not white. They have darker features because they mixed with Moors from North Africa. That's why they're considered not really quote unquote Italian. And I know Metatron knows this, but he's just trying to lie to his audience again to uplift his false, fake, phony narrative.
All Italians are Sicilians. To help you understand that, Professor, we can do it this way. All Texans are Americans, but not all Americans are Texans.
Yeah,
all Californians are Americans, but not all Americans are white. What do you mean by white, for crying out loud? So what is he, black? By these features, is this black?
But what does that mean?
Didn't you just say that that wasn't him? So why did the features matter if you think that that wasn't him, right? Now, I can tell by the morphology that probably, like I said, West Asian, Somali, in some cases, an Ethiopian, Ethio-Semitic Persian in some cases, possibly, but you really can't know from the bust. But if that was the case, I wouldn't be surprised, because the morphology of Africa, you know, is very, very diverse.
Because none of them are white. Is he Phoenician? Is he Berber? Whatever that means. Is he African? He's African. That we could say that with certainty. He is,
because he was born in Africa. Yeah. So is Elon Musk.
Yeah. Again, false term. Like I said previously, Carthage had been in Africa. Whether you're dealing with the so-called Imahag or Berber, quote unquote, Amazigh ancestry being inter-African, or the Phoenicians being descendants of the African Semitic people who migrated out, you know, after the end of the humid period. So again, to try to equate Elon Musk to this is just the example of a false equivalence. Doesn't work.
African. What that means beyond that is anybody's guess, but he's not European.
And yeah, I do agree, like past a certain point, Africa isn't Italy. Yeah, they're talking about the Moorish ancestry when they say that. This is well known. There's even coats of arms all over Italy that literally shows the Moors, you know.
So that was one thing we can actually say for sure. My whole point is, look, it doesn't matter.
Okay, of course it doesn't matter. Then she goes into so first oh my God, these professors. The
reason why she's saying it doesn't matter is because she's speaking to white people. It's white people who want to know if Hannibal's black or not because of their own, you know, complexes. Black people don't ask this question. This is white people. So she's saying it doesn't matter to white people who may have racist proclivities, saying that even if he's black, that doesn't change anything. It's still the same history. It's still the same dynamics between Carthage and Rome. That's why she's saying it doesn't matter. And Nick, the questioner, the interviewer, agreed. He's like, yeah, it's cool if he was black. Yeah, that's cool. That doesn't really change anything. But to racist white people, that upsets the hierarchy that they have in their mind, where black people are at the bottom and white people are on top. If one of the greatest generals who made Rome tremble, who nearly defeated Rome, was black, that crumbles the hierarchy that they have in their mind. So they're hell-bent on maintaining this myth of white supremacy. That's why they can't allow historical figures like Septimius Severus or Hannibal to be considered black. They just won't do it.
Really hope I become the nemesis of this type of academia. Not all academia. I have a lot of strong connections and mutual respect with a lot of fellow academics. Just find them in the comments. Here is, though, this type of academia, it pisses me off. And sorry, I'm speaking negatively. I want to see her face, not the face of the presenter. So you can't say it doesn't matter after you have given an entire presentation as to why he was not white. So it matters only if you can state that he was not white. But if I say, I don't think he was black, then it doesn't matter. What a patronizing, annoying.
It's because of the context of the Western Academy, the silencing of African voices, black voices, the denial of the historical legacy of inter-African populations. That's why. It's not equal. It's not neutral. It's clearly not. And you don't need a PhD to be able to figure that out.
Annoying. It's, oh my gosh, way of thinking. It's like methodless. This is academy-less.
We can actually say for sure.
He's saying methodless without providing any sources.
He's not European. So that was one thing we can actually say for sure. My whole point is, look, it doesn't matter if he's black. People will never know, but it doesn't matter because he could be. But I know what he isn't, and he isn't European, and he isn't German, and he's not Nordic.
Who the heck? My gosh, the strawman. Who on Green Planet Earth, Professor Kennedy, talking about the strawman, who on Green Planet Earth says that the likes of Hannibal, leader of the Carthaginians, who provide more evidence and show my ability to discuss the confusion.
Yeah, screw this. Let's move it forward.
See this, Dr. Kennedy?
Even in Ethiopia, right? If we read Heliodorus's novel from the 3rd or 4th century CE, we don't know the exact date. He's got they tell the myth of Andromeda in that, and Andromeda, and of course we have 5th century bases of this. So Phoenix, who's the father of Andromeda, who they're white, or they're represented as Phoenician, as not black, but they're in a space that is filled with black people. So, but the crux of the story of Heliodorus is that the king and queen of Ethiopia are black, and they have a daughter though who comes out to have really white skin. And she's called white because she's a woman, but she has really pale skin, and so the mother has to hide the birth of this child because she's afraid that
I haven't got a clue what this has to do with Hannibal, but
people will think that she had the child out of wedlock. But in fact, what happened is, and here you can get a little bit of insight into ancient medical theories. There is a medical theory called imprinting, where if in the act of sex you are staring at something, that image can imprint onto the fetus. It's something about how they understood how the eye worked, the nature of how the eye worked. And so in the story, this black Ethiopian king and queen of Ethiopia are procreating, and she stares at a painting on the wall of Andromeda. And so the pale skin of Andromeda imprints on the child. And the whole thing ends up happy. Everybody's fine. Look, mom and dad, it's really me. But in the meantime, she's kidnapped by pirates and raised by shepherds. And there's true love. It's sort of like the Princess Bride of the ancient world. It's a really great story. But what it tells us, though, is how very common this sort of idea of these mixed identities are in North Africa. That we have these stories that have...
I still do not know why she went through this. I am one of those who pushes the idea that Egypt was multi-ethnic and multicultural, that...
Again, this idiot, this moron, I explained it in my previous video. You can be multi-ethnic and be black. A black nation like Nigeria has a multitude of ethnicities. A nation like Congo has a multitude of ethnicities, a multitude of phenotypic diversity. Logically speaking, just because a population, a nation, or a society is multi-ethnic with phenotypic diversity does not mean that they're not black. Even within contemporary diaspora and discourse in the African-American vernacular English, you have dark skin, brown skin, light skin, red bone, yellow bone. These are people describing skin in different phenotypes and hair textures, but they're all still black. And you can even see this in classical Africa and contemporary Africa as well, with different names and labels that we use to define the different multitude and variances of complexion between the black population. So just because it's multi-ethnic, just because it has phenotypic diversity, does not mean that it's not black. You can't logically deduce that it's not black.
Not monolithic when it comes to the ethnicity you would have there, and how would it be? The same for the rest of North Africa, really, because of its geographical location, because of its geolocation. The entire coast of North Africa is a conduit and a connection between the Mediterranean world, in the sense of Mediterranean Europe, and Africa.
Yeah, literally. There's not a continent of Africa that isn't multicultural, right? There's not a country on the continent. Now, they weaponize multicultural the same way that they weaponize Mediterranean and they weaponize the concept of a Semitic race, because what they're trying to do is be proximal to whiteness. So multicultural generally means, no agency, and it's kind of weaponized within the academy to oppose, things like Black nationalism, those who are fighting for Black agency. Whenever you have a Black movement, you always have like the BIPOC, or you have the people of color thing, coming in to dilute it. And it's not to say that we don't want to have respect for other institutions and other movements, but at the same time, if something specifically for the Black community, you shouldn't be using multicultural to weed it out. And in most cases, from the civil rights era until the modern DEI era, multicultural typically means that it's going to go to white women. That's essentially what that means at the end of the day, right? Diversity and inclusion just means more positions for white women, right? That's essentially, it doesn't necessarily mean that it goes to Black people. And it's interesting how, Reggie, did a show about this, how multicultural hasn't even been completely theorized yet in academia as it applies to antiquity. And multicultural, again, is a modern construct. That is a modern construct that we are projecting back into the past, right? Especially more so than Black, which we find lexical evidence of in classical Africa. So this same moron who is against the anachronistic, appellations and impositions of modern terms into the past wants to use multicultural and multi-ethnic, right? And these modern terms to project understanding into the past. It's foolish, it's hypocritical, and it's ultimately idiotic.
And Asia. It connects all three. So yeah, you'll see Semitic people, you'll see Black people, you'll see Europeans, you'll see all sorts of people. I kind of doubt
he just did it. He positioned Semitic as in between Black and white. And he positioned Semitic as not Black. I've been to Ethiopia, seen some Ethiopians. They're Black. Many of the Amhara speakers, Eritrean, Tigrinya speakers, they're Semitic. They speak a Semitic language and they're Black people. So you can't juxtapose Semitic against Black, especially when Semitic most likely originated in Africa, especially for the proponents of Afro-Asiatic, right? So we got this multiple layers deep.
Doubt that's what she's going to go into, though, because with all of this preamble, what I would say is, yeah, probably Carthage was multi-ethnic, although Levantine in origin, which means Hannibal was most likely Semitic. Is that where she's going?
People who are Black and people who are not.
Yeah, just that's crazy. You have no way of knowing that Hannibal was predominantly originating from Semitic populations. You could assume so, but even if he did, that doesn't mean that he wasn't Black. But you also can't ignore the inter-African and Sahelian influence of the Carthaginians and the Garamanti people. You can't ignore that. So bottom line is he could have been Black on multiple levels and multiple layers and multiple directions. And for Metatron to just simply deny this, it just speaks to his abhorrent, views, narrative, and racialist intentions.
Black interacting all the time. And there's a reality that they could in fact be related, and it's not a big deal. This is the world that Hannibal exists in, right? This is the world of the Nubians and the Cushites, of the Ethiopians and the kingdom of Aksum, of West African Ethiopians who are obviously Black, of the Garamantes who we don't know what they look like, of the people known as the Berbers, who also, again, this is not an actual ethnic category. It becomes one later because it can connect to sort of linguistic categories, but it's actually up in the air what to be called a Berber actually means. And we
case by case
have this sort of stew pot of Phoenicians who have settled in these places, but they've integrated and mixed with people who are already there. And as we can go back to our Herodotus.
And according to Shamar Kikeda, which I think I referenced in my first video response to Metatron, he literally says that even if the Phoenicians are separate from Africans, which they're not, if we look at the Natufians and ancestral North African ancestors of the Natufians, they're absolutely not separate from Africa. But even if they were, by the time that Carthage was developed, the Phoenicians had deeply integrated into African society. And at that point, they were completely Africanized. So again, like that's literally a mute point, right? And Shamar Kikeda even uses Metatron's false point, but in a different way, in the sense that if you're trying to say that the so-called Boers of South Africa are African because of XYZ, but then you want to turn around and say that the Phoenicians are not African, even though Carthage is an African civilization developed in Africa, and most of the commoners were from inner Africa, right? Whereas the elites were of Levantine descent. That's illogical. That's completely hypocritical. What you got on this, James?
Oh, nothing much, Cam. Just came in to come in and show some support, man. I've been kind of busy, you know, studying myself. I'm getting ready to put something together as we speak. Yeah, man. I understand now why donations are important. So if anybody can support Brother Cam, man, editing these videos are a job.
Yeah, Trust it is. It's a
real job.
It is.
So, and especially, I mean, no one's asking anyone to do put this stuff together, but if you care about your people, you find yourself trying to figure out a way to where you can try to contribute.
Absolutely.
So basically, you know, man, I mean, this is my first time. Just, you know, I've been supposedly putting a presentation together for over 6 months to a year, right?
Yeah.
And I see why I've been hesitating, because I've dreaded the moment of having to sit up for hours on end, you know, figuring this stuff out. But it's really challenging and it's interesting, and I'm getting the hang of it. I'm messing with Canva. I like the way that they got this stuff set up. I didn't know if it was this easy. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm getting the hang of it now, so I'm kind of getting my stride. So hopefully, I can't say, but maybe within a week or two, man, I might have something to put together. And I want to do something with some papers and stuff that I'm kind of doing some animation right now.
Yeah.
And some stuff like that. But I want to kind of do something kind of like on just a paper and showing some sources of some of the stuff that's going on. But I finally cracked the code, Cam.
Yeah.
I cracked the code on the 99.9% all humans, right?
Okay.
I finally cracked it, right? I was like, it's impossible, right?
Yeah.
Because you know, they said that in 1999.
Yeah.
And so when you discover introgression in 2010 and 2015, that 99.9% can't stay the same.
Nah.
So you know, you got people that's saying that it's off inside of the 9, right?
Yeah.
But I found out what the deal was, and it's actually I want to. You mind if I share my screen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me see if I can find it real quick before. Hold on. I kind of want to just show.
And as you're looking for that, I'm just going to read Trigger's comment. He's like, "With the point on multi-ethnicity, I can argue that all groups have some degree of diversity anyway. So it becomes a moot point when diversity could be defined as variation from city to city." Yeah, facts. Like how you define diversity means something. And again, they weaponize diversity. When they use diversity, when they use multi-ethnicity, multicultural, they're trying to say non-Black. That's essentially what they're doing. When I could go to Nigeria right now and see all types of ethnicities, all types of diversity, all types of variation, and it's 99% Black. So that argument fails in reality.
Correct. So, but see, this is gonna be wild. Watch this, Cam. This was the eureka moment when I was like, oh, okay. Now, but see, I don't think that. How do I share my screen? Hold on. Let me see if this is gonna work. Now, see, what was going on was science hadn't actually caught up to that data, right?
Is it sharing?
So that's still, yeah, I'm sharing now. So
there it is. Yeah.
So science hadn't caught up to that 99.9% because that's something that they did when they first did the genome. But let me read this real quick, and I got this off of the national something from the website on the Human Genome Project when it started and stuff. So it says, how do people's genomes vary? So let me read this real quick. It says people's genomes are far more similar to each other than they are different. It is frequently stated that any two people's genomes are 99.9 identical to one another. This percentage is based on finding that on average a single nucleotide difference exists between two people's genomes once every 1,300 nucleotides or so. However, this is oversimplification because it only accounts for single nucleotide differences. See, so they was only talking about one of the nucleotides, but because of new better techniques and machinery and stuff like that, they were able to figure out, in time, they were able to figure out that it's other variants at also introgression that causes more variance and differences. So either which way, let me go ahead. So in reality, any two people's genomes are on average 99.6% identical and 0.4% different. See that?
Yeah.
So it changed.
Yeah.
And I got it. And so what the deal is, they use the single nucleotide. If you only accounting for that, which is what they were doing in 1999 and 2000, and when they sequenced it in 2023, they were only using the single nucleotide. But you also have to account for deletions and insertions, and then you have to count for structural variation. Structural variation is when they found out about the Neanderthal and the introgression. Let me just say that. See that? So now they push it to 0.4. This is why we see the phenotypical differences. This is why some of their adaptation to high altitude. This accounts for the pigmentation and everything off in this. So I just wanted to show that, man. And I'm gonna this just a quick, what I've been studying. So what do you think about this?
I mean, I just think that ultimately dealing with the genomic variants, we don't really understand it fully, but at the same time, like there's political agendas at play because North Africa is such a battleground. I mean, I always knew this, but even as I was studying more about dealing with Neanderthal introgression and just dealing with when they try to say that these populations became white, or some people try to say that they were always white, or that they always had these types of people, in the African continent, I'm just knowing and learning how deeply connected North African propaganda is to their overall racial hierarchy.
Well, this information kind of is going to be the nail in the coffin from what I see, because the only way that you can account for non-African integration is through the integration with non-humans.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Human DNA is 99.9% the same. It's only when you get the integration that you start to fall off into the 96%, 99.6%.
Yeah.
So when they're talking about humans are 99.9% the same, they're talking about the people that's indigenous to Africa. Once you get the integration, it drops down. And I've been looking for that. Doesn't that make perfect sense?
It does.
It simplifies it. But in the haplogroup mutation or human mutation. So you can't tell a race or differences through the mutation of just humans because it's human.
Yeah.
It's only the introgression that makes to where you can identify, because when you look off into the DNA, they've been up there for 400,000 years. You don't think they turned light? when we came out, we introgressed with them, and that helped us to speed up that process. Just like if you procreate with a European now, your baby's going to speed up the process. Yeah. So that's what they did. So, man, I mean, it's just beautiful that I finally found the nail in the coffin for this whole conversation.
Yeah, and the fact that, these scholars, they deal with the Neanderthal like every paper, every single genetic paper about racial populations, they have Neanderthal in there because Neanderthal is like a rubric to figure out who's who.
That's the only way you're going to be able to do it. But to find that integration and find the actual verbiage that's needed to be explained, that's what I've been looking for.
Yeah.
So now structural variation counts for. Look, let me show you. Structural variation counts. It's even a chart for this shit. It's crazy.
You want to share again?
Yeah. Let me just share this. Let me see if I can show you this structure. Yeah. Here it is right here. Yeah. It's actually broken down on a chart that I have. So I'm gonna put this together where you can see it, and they actually have the mathematical equation that you need. See, it's all broken down. So you got 6 billion nucleotides all together, but the 27 million nucleotides is what's going to see. And see, here go the structural variation accounts for 20,000 of it. See? But it's 27, I mean 20 million of them.
20 million.
It's 27 million. See, now over here to the left, this is what they were telling us that made us 99.9% the same. See, it's 0.1. But see, when you add this full 3%, see, that's not a zero in front of that. This is what we've been needing to know.
Yeah, that's crazy. This is where the integration is right here.
Yeah, full 3%. But see, this 99.9% over here is what we can see. So here's the whole pie. They're taking out the 27 million right here. See,
wait, is that saying like, is that because I see 99.6 and that's the non-variable portion of the human genome, and then the variable portion of the genome, that's 0.4. So what I'm seeing here is the structural variants are 0.3, and then the insertion deletions in the single nucleotide polymorphisms are 0.1 together.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it is. Okay, for sure.
That's cold, lady.
It is. So like the 0.3 of the genome is really where the differentiation starts.
Yes, this is what they found when they discovered the integration in 2010 and 2015. See what I'm saying?
So we got to map that 20 million and see how much of that 20 million is the integration.
Oh, I already did it. Trust me.
Oh, for sure, yeah. You already got it.
I was looking, and you got to think about it, Cam, because in 2000 they were already saying 99.9%.
Yeah.
So what changed? Just the integration, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, I'm just saying I'm excited because I've been tripping on this for about a week by myself. So I'm just glad to be.
What do you think of this? You know, this Phoenician cat, say Egyptologist cat, who is exposed as like a Spaniard, you know, from Guyana, so-called Spaniard from. What do you think of that dude?
I'm not even familiar with him.
He's like an anti-black troll. Like he been trolling on YouTube for a minute. So like he was at the beginning of this when I roasted him. He did a video against King Monologue. And I figured out like, all right, I know who you are, so let me just debunk all your talking points. And that's what I did in that video. And now I'm moving over to Metatron, and Metatron's crazy. Like this video was a response to my video, but he just didn't mention me. But I'm gonna give him some, you know.
But it seems like he's going at Dr. Kennedy, right?
He is, but he did that because that was in my original video.
Oh, so basically you were showing Dr. Kennedy what she was saying.
Yes.
He didn't like what she was saying. So now he's avoiding you.
Yes.
And dealing with her. Okay.
Yes, he's scared of me. He's a scaredy cat.
Right. But now I've heard some of his recent videos have been getting pushed back from his own people.
Yeah. I haven't even really been watching those like that. I just been like, because he did a video about home team history in Carthage, and I was like, all right, let me get into this. Because honestly, for me, like I've always read information about the blackness of the Carthaginians, but I didn't really care that much because the whole Phoenician thing, and like I'm more interested in Inner Africa personally. So like North Africa after Kemet fell, like North Africa, honestly, I never really gave a damn about, right?
Right.
But I started doing the research, and I'm like, damn, Semitic could have came from Africa, and I'm like, damn, these people have Sahelian body formation. Man, they have Sahelian heads.
Wait till I get done with this, Cam. It's gonna be beautiful. Because you know what I'm saying. I've seen all like who are the variants. They got like 0.1% Neanderthal. And then that's what they used to try to say that was Neanderthals. But yo, I got that in me. Look at how I look. You know what I'm saying? Like this is what I'm gonna put it all together for us, right? In a simplified manner where it's over.
Yeah.
I finally got motivated to go ahead and get in. So man, that's why I wanted to see what you got, what everybody had going on in the Discord, but it don't seem like everybody doing their own thing right now. So
yeah, everybody's kind of in hibernation mode. Shout out to Sadiq in the chat. Everybody's in hibernation mode, and I just wanted to get this. I'm gonna start roasting these folks. Just these anti-black clowns. Just to get some commotion and entertainment on the channel.
Yeah, I'm gonna do. I'm just, like I said, this is definitely me getting into this camp. It's kind of got me motivated right now. So I'm just gonna get to jump in the fray myself. So shit, it's up right now.
100%. Yeah,
I'm gonna mute out. I'm gonna mute out and let you go ahead and finish this presentation.
For sure. Yeah.
I might just fall back into the chat and let you.
Yeah, it's all good. I'm about to end in like 5.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Sure,
peace and peace to Sadiq too.
Peace, y'all. Yeah, so I mean, this was a great show, dealing with some of the misapprehensions from Metatron. And actually we got another person up in here. What's good with E-Bizzle?
What's going on, man? How y'all doing?
Yeah, we chilling. We just going over, some of this propaganda from Metatron and, just some of the lies that he's been saying about North Africa.
Yeah. I've been listening to the show. Y'all got a great show going on.
For sure. Appreciate it. You got any comments, anything you want to add before we close out?
No, you know what? Definitely appreciate the show. I'm out here in Chicago, so
for sure.
I don't know where y'all at.
I'm in the Bay.
Oh, okay, in San Francisco.
Yeah, San Francisco, Oakland, Bay Area.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yep. Much love. So yeah, we've been chopping it up about Metatron. Stay tuned to the channel. For those of y'all who are part of the Patreon, we're gonna release more content on the Patreon. But I'm gonna start to do this more regularly, just going in and some of the anti-Black propaganda, the racism. We went over the Semitic race and the Mediterranean race, how this is proximal to whiteness. These are Caucasians if you use Carlton Kuhn's analysis and framework. So this is just a strategy that they use to have a form of false neutrality so that they could actually steal the inheritance and steal the legacy of Black and inter-African civilizations. So like I said, I'm finna release another video within the week, just dealing in detail with some of the fallacious commentary that Metatron gave, in response to Dr. Rebecca Futo Kennedy. And, stay up to date with my channel as well as Without History. Without History has dropped so many good videos with respect to the Carthaginians. So, stay on the lookout for that as well.
You know what I wanted to ask you is what do you think 100%. About the Lord Jamar situation?
What was the Lord Jamar situation?
What's his name? Professor.
With the
with Godfrey. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I mean, it's the same thing with what's his name, with Ben Carson. Like, I've seen Ben Carson. I've met 19 Keys before. I met some of these brothers who are connected with a nation or the Nation of Islam, loosely affiliated. Some of them deal with conspiracy theories. Now, Lord Jamar, like, to me, he kind of went off on the deep end, especially with him playing footsie with like the FBAs and like dealing with those Dane Calloway type conspiracy theories. He kind of went on the deep end with that. So I never really got deep into those aspects. But then again, if somebody like Wes Huff or somebody like, I don't even know the name of the scholar who he was debating, but like if somebody like that, who to us would be a lightweight, can slap you up.
Right.
It's just more proof as to why you got to get into spaces like this and actually get in the ring with the real brothers to actually, teach you something or two. So, and honestly, with Lord Jamar, I kind of think that he's more of an entertainer and he's more so pushing this type of information to build his own platform up. I don't even think he's legitimate. So, if he gets beat and he gets slapped around by one of these, recessives, it is what it is.
Yeah. That's why, when I was listening in, I appreciate you all show. And, a lot of times, our people, we say our people as far as being Black folks.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, we get beat up by other folks.
Yeah. And it's the lesser of us, like, because I don't consider, Billy Carson, good brother, probably. I don't consider him a scholar. I've always said that to me, like, some of his arguments are clumsy in appearance and they're not necessarily developed. So it's the same thing with boxing. You got a rookie out there. It doesn't matter if you were Black or white. If you're a rookie, going against a pro boxer, you're gonna get beat. You're gonna get slapped on the canvas, right?
And you know what's crazy about that is everybody talking about Gervonta Davis and what happened a couple of weeks ago. You know, I said if you better, you better.
yeah. Period. So it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. And like I could look at these dudes going against some of these white Christian apologists, and I'm like, of course you finna lose, bro. Like you don't even train, you don't even read, so like of course you're gonna lose. They won't step to us. Like Metatron is running scared. He's not gonna respond to me because he knows he's gonna get that ass whooped. So it's just you got to know time.
What's your thoughts on apologetics? Apologetics.
On who?
Apologetics.
Yeah. I mean, to me, honestly, I'm not a fan of. I actually harp on Black Christian apologists on my Patreon because they literally promote what I call chronology. Not to say that there are certain forms of apologetics that could be useful, especially like if you're dealing specifically with Christian apologetics. There's a certain angle that you could take that is not, detrimental to the well-being of African people. But most of what I've seen, like, characters like the God Logics of the world, the BK apologists of the world, the urban apologetics movement, I'm not the biggest fan because I think that they castigate African legacy for the purpose of promoting Orthodox Christianity, which to me is totally unnecessary.
Okay. Well, look, man, take down my. Well, I can say it right now because I know you about to close. But my email, and I ain't ashamed to say it, but e_bond1@yahoo.com.
Could you post it in the private chat?
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, post it in the private chat, and I'll be sure to shoot you an email. All right, y'all. With that, thank everybody for tuning in. And I'm finna play actually, I want to read Merp's comments. You said, Ampim should cover how they vandalized Carthaginian statues. They legit carved their hair and face to look more straight. Look, I wouldn't even doubt it. Like, I just spoke with the Egyptologist a few days ago that literally, like, sat me down, showed me proof that Nefertiti bust is fake. So I wouldn't doubt it. And the Carthaginians are the ancestors of the wars of themselves. In many cases, yeah, from a North African context, and say he never responded to Spanish. No, he's not going to respond. Like, they're not going to respond to somebody that they know will beat them, right? So I know he saw my video because when I posted this, he posted a response to Dr. Kennedy. So I don't expect him to respond to me, but every time he says something stupid with propaganda against Black folk, I'm definitely going to respond to him. So with that, as Pan-African James said, you could hit the Cash App or the Patreon. You could join the Patreon. I believe the link will be in the description. You support the channel, Cash App, definitely support it. And be on the lookout for future content. And with that, I am going to play the outro, and we finna be out of here. Peace.
Louisa.